Hello to everyone. My name is Tünde Fülöp from the Austrian Chamber of Workers. And I have the pleasure to host this session with my colleague, Helene Baumgartner.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Helene is working in digital matters. She's a business administrator who has held positions in IT, high positions, and now is a specialist for platform work, for consulting workers on digitalization issues and cybersecurity.
You want to introduce both of us?
You can introduce the Chamber of Workers, because probably people don't know what it is.
Maybe for who does not know, who is the Chamber of Labor in Austria? We are the official representative of all employees in Austria. That means we are looking after social and economic interests of workforce. Within the organization, my colleague Tünde and I, we focus on how technology is changing the way we work, and we advocate for fair digital policies.
And as we are working with the issues of digital labor, regulation, control, power shifts related to artificial intelligence at the workplace, I'm very, very happy that we will have an interesting keynote by our two keynote speakers, and we'll present them now. Camilla Salim-Wagner and Adio Dinica are from DAIR, the Distributed AI Research Institute. They will speak about the Data Workers Inquiry. This is a community-based transnational research initiative which gives data workers recognition and includes their expertise, centering their voices and in the AI global supply chain. Camilla is a political scientist, and she's part of the organizing team of the Data Workers Inquiry, where she supports community-driven research. She's also an intern at the DAIR and associated researcher to the Data, Algorithmic Systems and Ethics Research Group at the Weizenbaum Institute. Her interests include the challenges of regulating labor and technology in the face of globalization and promoting technological development that aligns with the public good. Adio holds a PhD in political science, and he's researching AI governance at the intersection of digital labor, decolonial theory, and technology policy. He is a research fellow at DAIR and a co-lead of the Data Workers Inquiry. He has extensive fieldwork experience in various African countries and has contributed to impactful studies on AI ethics and socio-economic impacts of AI globally.
And after we have this keynote where I'm very eager to hear it, we'll have a little discussion. And therefore, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Madeleine Müller. She's senior researcher and consultant at the Research Institute. She works there in the intersection of law, ethics, and digital rights. Her work covers a wide range of human rights issues, from online security to the challenges of AI-supported decision-making. And besides her research, she's also a lecturer at the University of Applied Sciences in Burgenland. Then next, I'd like to introduce Wolfi Christel. Wolfi is a researcher and the director of Cracked Labs in Vienna. He is an expert on the impact of technology, especially regarding digital surveillance and algorithmic decision-making. His work is widely recognized for identifying illegal data practices, and his findings have played a key role in several legal cases and GDPR enforcement actions. Currently, he is also collaborating with the Citizen Lab to investigate how digital tools affect our democracy and human rights.
Yeah, and with this powerful expertise in our panel, I'm sure we will have an excellent discussion. After some questions to the panelists, I will open the floor to all of you, and I hope you will participate. Adio, Camilla, please come to the podium. It is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having us. Today, we're going to talk about our project, which is called Data Workers Inquiry, but we're going to talk also more broadly about the work that is done in data work and the labor conditions it happens in. I hope all of you got a chance to be at the film screening yesterday. Was someone not there? Just so I know how... Yeah, okay. Great, because the first thing I'm going to do is explain what exactly data work is, because it's a term that not everyone is familiar with. Data work is the labor that goes into producing data for AI training. So that includes training, procuring, creating, finding the data that goes into training data sets. That includes preparing data sets by organizing them, structuring them, labeling it so the data actually has meaning, which can then be understood by computers. More concretely, this involves tasks of data generation, so taking pictures, taking videos, doing searches, painting your own paintings, taking pictures of cats and dogs. It involves annotation, so taking data that is already there and adding details, for example, marking exactly the contours of a cat on a picture. So in the future, an AI system can identify exactly what elements of an image are cat versus not cat. It's also tasks of verification, which includes content moderation, so verifying that a data output or is correct, is good, is appropriate, or verifying that the content in a data set complies with a specific set of rules. So social media moderation is a type of work that goes into just making social media safer, but that also goes into training the automatic recognition systems for those social media filters. And lastly, and less known of all, is AI impersonation, which is when people are hired to pretend to be an AI system when those systems fail, when they are not functioning properly, or sometimes when they don't exist at all. Data work is the backbone of AI production. AI doesn't exist without data to be processed and to be created and generated. And it's very important to understand everything we're going to talk about, that data work does not happen in Silicon Valley at the fancy Facebook offices, at the fancy Google or Anthropic offices. This work is outsourced. It's contracted out to platforms such as Amazon Mechanical Turk, Outlier AI, remote tasks in what very much looks like delivery work, except it's done at home on a computer, so completely independent of your location. It can happen anywhere 24/7. Or to business process outsourcing companies, which we can imagine works very much like a call center, except instead of answering calls, people are processing data in different forms.
So now that we sort of have an understanding of what data work entails, I think I'll talk a bit about what the Data Workers Inquiry as a project is. So it begins from a position where we argue that, as Karl Marx argued years before, and then we sort of worked on his Workers' Inquiry methodology and added the Data Workers' Inquiry methodology. So we argue that only workers are the experts of their own conditions, and they are the ones who can describe and explain their conditions better than any of us in the room, despite us having PhDs or us having studied work for years. But we are not data workers, and they are the ones who can do this work. So from that angle, we then say data workers are not just workers, but they are people with epistemic authority. They know what they're talking about, and their knowledge is very essential for this industry. Therefore, as we did the Data Workers Inquiry, we engaged them not as informants, not as interviewees, but as experts who have domain knowledge of whatever they are doing. So from that angle, that meant we were working more as guides giving them a platform to express themselves. So what we did is we asked these workers, how would you like to talk about your work? That means the output we have in that sense is not your typical academic output where we write journal articles, which gather dust and some, if they are still printed, that is. But basically, we say to each worker, how would you want to express yourself? So in our repository on the website given there, we have videos, we have vlogs, we have podcasts, we have graphic novels, because this is how the workers thought they could express themselves. So Data Workers Inquiry as a team basically comprised of the three people that you see there. Perhaps those who were in the film, you might have seen our PI, Milagros Micheli, and then the other two, I think you probably have seen them. So the project is, as you can see there, all over the globe. So often when we hear about AI, we think of Sam Altman, we think of Dario Amodei, Elon Musk. But the people whom we don't think about, who are literally the bedrock, the foundation of what we call artificial intelligence, are these people you see over there. So clearly you can see some of them have their face and names. And I want to draw particular attention to Yasser Al-Rayas and Ruqayya Al-Hamada. Ruqayya is actually a refugee in Lebanon from Syria. So these workers, what that means is they're usually workers who are in what we call vulnerable positions, which we'll explain as we move forward. But and those whom you see without names there, if you know your geography very well, you realize that most of those without faces are actually from Germany. So this work does not only happen outside Europe or the US, but also happens in Germany. But why do you think those workers don't have the actual names there? I think we'll explain this as we move.
As you see, we've worked with a lot of people. This project has been going on for 3 years. Every single project or inquiry focuses on a specific workplace, a specific geography, a person's experience, their colleagues' experience. And there's just so much that we could never fit into a 2-hour keynote, much less a 20-minute one. So we're going to focus on 3 specific issues, 3 things that across the inquiries always come up in different forms that are very structural to how the work happens, the conditions it happens in. And the first one is that the pay is very low and there's pervasive forms of wage theft. So you're not getting the pay you were promised. When I say low, I do mean very low pay. Data annotators are sometimes paid 0.014 cents per image. So if you've ever done a CAPTCHA on a website, you know it takes like 30 seconds. But if you have to do 1,000 images to get paid €1.40, that is a very, very low pay. You're going to spend, the hourly wage becomes really low. Added to that, when people are doing this work for platforms, think of Uber but for data work, they're not getting paid for any of the time they spend preparing for the tasks, any of the time they spend studying the very complex instructions they're given, time waiting for tasks. If they take a pee break, they're not getting paid the 0.014 cents per image. Content moderators in Germany, so people doing content moderation for Facebook, for Meta, who are seeing the worst images that you can imagine on social media, they're paid 14 euros an hour, so barely above the German minimum wage. In Nairobi, this goes as low as $2 per hour. So pay is very low. And I want to highlight the inquiry by Alex Chavez. He's from Venezuela. And what he experienced and what many people working in this platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk experience is that they're not getting paid in money at all. They're paid in gift cards, Amazon gift cards. So, exactly. So the money they make can't be spent on rent or groceries. It can be spent on Amazon products. And they end up having to go through a million different loops, losing money in the process, losing time in the process to convert their earnings into actual money that can be spent on food and rent. And another thing I wanted to highlight is we do very much try, whenever possible, to bring people to speak of their own experiences. So we're not doing a keynote speaking for people. But when that's not possible, we always make sure to highlight their words. And throughout the presentation, you'll find QR codes that lead specifically to the work of that person we are talking about. Another form of wage theft, I'm going to let Yasser talk about it.
The compensation is always subject to change at the end of the project. The company holds the power to reject a batch of work, even after we've poured our time and effort into completing it. This could end up costing us money instead of helping us earn it.
Context for that last phrase is that Yasser was working in Syria. There was an energy fallout, so he didn't have internet. He had to go to an internet cafe and spend $1 on the fees for internet and internet and energy, and he got like $4.50 for 3 hours of work. So at the end, if the work that gets rejected and he doesn't even get the $4.50, he just paid 1 hour $1 to work for 4 or 5 hours plus the time for transport.
So as my colleague Camila hinted earlier that, or as we all know, hopefully we know this, that when AI was created, I'm saying AI here, and feel free to define it how you want, but maybe let's jump to everyone's favorite new toy in the digital playfield, ChatGPT. They basically went on the internet and dredged all the sewer, the human sewer that we spill on the internet. And now there are people, so think of the most depraved thing you can think about. And I'm talking depraved. People molesting children, posting videos of that. People chopping off people's heads. They post all of them on the internet. And when all of this was dredged up in the older episode of ChatGPT, some people had to go through that muck and classify this as harmful, not good, and whatever. If you've ever gone on social media, you've seen sometimes a little box that says, do you want to click this to see what's behind it? And oftentimes we have that privilege, but there are workers who do not have that privilege. So 9 hours a day, sometimes 11 hours a day, going through gory detail after gory detail. So what does that lead to? Mental health. So we have spoken to people who have been diagnosed with severe PTSD, almost worse than people who have seen active combat, all in the name of training AI. So again, we'll let Moffat explain what he means.
So the effect were across the board. Everyone who worked on the project experienced this kind of mental challenges, especially sexual content can really affect someone's emotions and how you think and how you see people. Bearing the fact that you are reading text about rape, violently raping people, and some people are being killed, it hit me so much as a person, as an individual, because after working on this text, and my behavior started changing, and by that time I was married to a young, beautiful lady. And then when my behavior started changing and screaming at night, waking up, not sleeping, she started questioning my behavior. But with our Kenyan culture, you can't just explain to someone that you are working on sexual content. They might think that you are doing something illegal. So I kept this to myself, and my wife could not cope up with my changing behavior, and she decided to go.
So I don't need to add anything to this, but the work does not only affect the workers, but also their families. And I think I would like to draw attention to this particular situation where there was a genocide in Tigray, and the other place that you're thinking about as well. But for now, we'll focus on Tigray. So people in Tigray are dying, and the language they use is called Tigrinya, and there are not many people who know this language. Meta needed to hire moderators to moderate what was going on in the war. And guess who they employed? Refugees fleeing from this particular conflict. And in particular, there's the story of Fasika, where they end up being dependent on drugs, because that's the only way to deal with it. You are running away from a war where your people are being massacred by your government and the neighboring country, and the only work that you can find is moderating content about the very war you ran away from. So there's a story of someone I spoke with. His name is Abel, who, while he was doing his content moderation work in Nairobi, he came across a dead body. And as he's annotating the dead body, he noticed this was his cousin. How long do you think he was given to go and, deal with that? I'll save you the time, 1 hour. After that, come back on the shift, or else you won't get paid. So just think of that. And this is how, when we use ChatGPT, when we say, oh, it's so good at making pictures of me, turning me into a cartoon, this is what goes on behind the scenes. And there's a specific, so I already explained that they were particularly hiring refugees coming from this war to moderate the war. And Camilla will explain further on that particular point.
All right. So as a technical context, even though neither of us are technical people, all of this violent content needs to be moderated, to be filtered out from either the training data sets or the outputs. So if you don't want a chat model to be spewing out hate and racism, you need to either have data at the start that is not hateful and racist, or you need to do a further training and refinement where you say, model. All of these are bad examples. So you need to have a collected, curated, very structured, huge database of all the bad stuff you don't want. So that can happen. And they were really targeting vulnerable populations because you get to pay people who are vulnerable less. That is, at the end of the day, the rationale behind it. This is a very, very, very tiny part of the huge slum that is Kibera, which we visited very recently. It was a very difficult place to be in and to see, and particularly because we know people, we have built relationships. We've known Maureen for 3 years now, and we got to see exactly what they mean when they say they go to the worst parts of town to recruit the most desperate people.
So this place called Kibera, just to add, is the 3rd largest slum in the world. So think of informal settlements, think of open sewer. As you can see, the houses behind us, so there are 3 stages. The house made from mud, basically, and other houses made from iron sheets. And this is where Sama goes in there and hires people there. But first, they have to train them. And for this training, you have to pay to be trained. And you only get your money back if they hire you. And again, we heard how much money they get. So again, Maureen explains best what we mean by that they target vulnerable people.
When we first initiated at Summersource, he made it clear to us that one, Summersource employs the unemployable. That is why their target population is from the slums. So if Kibera, for example, Madare, Kariobangi, Kaongware. Actually, the funny thing, when you're applying to join Summersource, they have a drop-down for those targeted areas. So in case you're not from that area, you'll not be picked to work at Summersource. So you have to either pick one of those, even if you're not from that, but that is the main thing for you to be considered to join Summersource. So once you're at Summersource, they believe you are illiterate, because if you are unemployable, that means you're not needed by any other company. So they're doing you a favor, actually. So in their mind, they know 1, you're illiterate, 2, you're vulnerable, 3, anything thrown at you, you're going to accept. Because coming from the slum anyway, someone who comes from the slum, anything thrown at you, you just accept and you say thank you.
What you see on your screen there is a timesheet, an actual timesheet shared by someone who was working at Sama. You can all see how many hours that person was clocking. But on their contract, they have 9 hours. And do I need to ask you to guess for how many hours they are paid? Not 11. 9, because that's what your contract says. But how do they get to work 11 hours? They are told, so they get 6 months contract from, let's say, Meta or another company, and then they figure, what if we make the workers work double, but still get paid 6 months, but they get the work done in 3 months? So they said to the worker, oh, look, the client wants their work done double time. So if you don't want, you can go home. But the thing is, these people operate on contracts that you are not guaranteed renewal. So if you want, you can go home. But are you guaranteed that when your contract ends, you'll get a new one? And how long do you think these contracts are? So the longest is 6 months. And the one you can see right there, where we've redacted the name of the person, is a 4-day work contract. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you come and you work for 4 days, and then we keep quiet. So there is another way of managing you, because now you have to perform and you have to deliver, because, well, your contract is up for renewal, so in 3 days' time. So they keep you in this consistent and persistent state of vulnerability, state of precarity. But it's not all is not lost, all is not doom and gloom. There is at least some form of a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not a train coming in the tunnel.
So the reason that we've managed to do this work for 3 years and to hear all of those sad and depressing stories, which honestly sometimes do get to us because we're human people and we care, is that we are working specifically with data workers who are organizing, who are fighting for change, who are fighting for better, who are fighting for their rights. And this is the work that we document, that we try to platform and to highlight, but we also try to support to all the extent that we can and that is possible. For example, on mental health, we have worked with Kauna, who's a psychologist and also a former content moderator, and she has developed a mental health initiative. She has developed a program where she, based on her knowledge, her expertise from academia, but also from life and from doing the work, has developed a program for community healing, for the actual mental support that is adequate to what the workers face, to the trauma that they experience, to the reality of their conditions and their communities. And this intervention was the project for and proposal for this intervention was something she developed as her research inquiry with us, but it's also something that is being piloted right now that we helped her secure some funding for, some seed funding for, and that is happening and actually making a change into the world. So it is absolutely amazing to see that happen and to continue to support that. On that same trip to Nairobi, where we did field work in Kibera, where we met the people we had worked with, and we met other people that we hadn't worked with before, but who are parts of the associations and the tentative unions and the communities fighting for change, they organized an incredible community healing event. They got together over 500 data workers, most of whom had been laid off only weeks prior. They got together to talk, to discuss the need for change, to talk about what they were feeling and experiencing, and to dance, because dancing is a form of healing. You can see some of Adio's awesome moves. And those workers specifically on that event, they were the ones that were moderating the video footage from the meta glasses you might have heard about. It was a big story in the news. A Swedish newspaper released the information that private video footage and images from meta glasses users was being moderated in Nairobi. And the consequence was that everyone that was in that project, over 1,000 people, was let go because Facebook didn't want to deal with the consequences of the public backlash to the breaches of data confidentiality, but also labor rights. And this is the last slide, and also a bit of shameless self-promotion. Because very recently the International Labour Organization met to talk about platform work, to talk about labor rights in the platform and gig economy, and we released a policy report where we specifically went into all of our inquiries, all of the people working in platforms and doing data work in them, and distilled what the specific challenges that data work in platforms brings about, to what extent they were being addressed in the first draft. That was the basis for discussion, offered concrete policy recommendations for how the text could better address the specific conditions of platform data workers. This was written with amazing colleagues, but also with workers and organized workers, to always center lived experience, expertise, epistemic authority. And the second photo is of our research lead at the German parliament talking to Abgeordnete, but she also made it very clear that she was only going to bring expert input if a worker could also give expert input. And this worker was also brought in to talk, to bring her own experiences. And so with that, we want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for this space.
You see? So thank you so much for your presentation. I must say it was intense. I saw snippets in Ghost in the Machine, and I checked your website, but I felt that it was really emotionally tasking, but also inspiring compared to usual research papers that I read. And I have a question to you about your methodology and dealing with the community researchers. So how does it work for you? How do you deal with, on one hand, working with such intense topics, and on the other hand, I want to know how you take care of the community researchers, because I've seen you don't have pictures on, and some people are anonymous, so I guess they're taking really high risks in exposing themselves in the project. Who wants to take which question?
I can start. Your question has many questions. I'm not sure I'm going to get to all of them. The first thing, and that was very important for us from the start, when we were starting this crazy new methodology, creating something that is different and action-oriented, was that the safety of the people working with us was paramount. This didn't make it to the presentation, but in data work, most frequently workers have to sign confidentiality agreements that are very strict. So the choice to talk to a researcher always brings risks to the workers. And that is why we always work with people who are already organizing, who of their own accord have said, I want to make change, I need to speak out, who already have some level of visibility and who are taking those risks out of their own motivation and accord, because we don't want to put people in risk. That said, we have employed lawyers to do a legal review of the pieces before they are published. In the cases people were worried, we have different levels of anonymity that can be made possible. And the whole process is led by the co-researchers. So what is said, what the topic is, how much visibility, the formats, all of that is decided by them, so such that it aligns with their goals, their safety level. Then, what else were the questions?
Maybe
Yeah.
would be emotional. Sure.
Right.
You have, Adio, you have also worked in field. So how is this methodology impacting you?
Well, the honest truth is this is hard work. This is difficult on an emotional level because we are not trained psychologists. And really what we do is care work, because some of these workers have stories that will give you nightmares for days. Case of sexual assault, not only them watching sexual assault, but also being victims of it. Because some of these workers were coming from different African countries to work in Nairobi, specifically the workers in Kenya. And then we have workers like Rukaya, who are refugees and missiles are falling, and she's calling you, and you are in Berlin. What can I do when missiles are falling? So that can, have this feeling of, so what the hell am I doing? But at the end, so of course, the first thing is therapy. We definitely had to hire a therapist for the group. And the second thing also is, I think it also comes from a conviction that most of us who are doing this work are doing this work because we actually genuinely want to see change. So my genesis into this work was from being a data worker myself, not on AI, but more on gig tasks. So, and the reason why I then went on this, I was like, no, this cannot happen. So it comes from that conviction where we are like, no, this has to change. And therefore we try to take care of each other. But number one, looking out for each other in the team. So which is why we are colleagues, but we are actually also friends, because if we just say, okay, work is done, go home, with this kind of work, it won't work. So we have to do that. And I think the satisfaction usually comes from when we see the workers that they actually are doing things like this dancing thing there. That for us was like, oh, wow. When they formed the Digital Labor Association, we're like, oh, okay. Those are the rewards of our work. So I think that's what I could say for now.
It's very important. A psychologist, not just for us, for everyone who wanted it throughout the research process.
So you have a strong personal mission that aligns with digital humanism. A last question before we give the floor also to our panelists. You've been bringing examples mostly from African countries, but I have seen that you have also community researchers in Germany, in France, in South America. Are we all becoming data workers?
Depends on how you define data work. If you define it very, very broadly, every time you use ChatGPT and you're like, no, I don't like this reply, and you click the little thumbs down, that is data that is being used to refine and refine the models. So in a very broad sense, yes. But in a concrete sense, no, because when you're doing that, you're still a user. You're not working specifically following the strict instructions, performance indicators, conditions all set out by the large tech industries and their intermediaries. It is a growing field. It's a field that, and a type of work that will not disappear with AI getting better in 1 year, because every time something new happens, the truth of the world changes. If you want a model to accurately say that the Chancellor of Germany is not Angela Merkel, you need a model that has up-to-date data. So data work is ongoing, structurally necessary to AI. This is not disappearing, and we should care even if not all of us are doing it.
If I can add to that, one of our colleagues at DARE, Adrian Williams, has an article called Zombie Trainers. So there are data workers who know they're data workers, and then there are zombie trainers, who is basically everyone in this room. Because every time you have clicked, you have identified a bridge or crosswalks, capture. What do you think you were doing? You were training AI. Every time you have used Grammarly to refine your writing, you're basically feeding your data into it. Every time you're having a Zoom meeting, what were you doing? You're feeding your information into training AI. So from that sense, we are all data workers. Whenever you go somewhere and you make recommendations of that this hotel is nice, what do you think you're doing? You're basically feeding into the whole system. So from that angle, we are all data workers. But as Camilla rightly explained, it's just the levels. We're just zombie trainers. No one is paying us, but we are doing this work.
Let's open the discussion maybe also to our other panelists. And Min Wolfi, you have done an extensive research on algorithmic management systems and their effect. And as you were talking also about fighting and rights, how, from your point of view, does technology affect the rights and freedoms and bargaining power of workers?
Yeah, it's not easy for me now to build a bridge from your wonderful research setup about kind of the worst possible form of platform work embedded into horrible global inequality and also part of the AI tech supply chain and so on to my work. Because I've been mostly researching, I've been working with Austrian Work Council members in well-unionized Austrian companies. But what I did is also look a lot about into the technology, its functionality, the mechanisms that I could identify in enterprise software. There is something, I did some research about call center software and of course also a little bit about business process outsourcing vendors like Teleperformance and so on. So this is a little bit close, but generally, how does affect digital technology, the rights, freedoms and bargaining power like on every level? And I would like to discuss it like we have been discussing automation for a decade now, since Taylorism. This is about like standardizing tasks, quantifying it, reorganizing work, streamlining work, and this can lead, of course, to maximized workload, acceleration, intensification, pressure, stress, and so on. But also, of course, digital technology enables kind of excessive surveillance, which can be used to target specific employees or even worker representatives. So I identified a lot of mechanisms, like from surveillance to performance and behavior monitoring to algorithmic or automated task direction or allocation, and in the end to some kind of algorithmic control where you have a feedback loop between like performance measurement, recording behavioral data, and directing tasks. There can be a lot of problems when rewards and punishments, so-called incentives, are being added. And I don't know. The basic question for me is like digital technology and data processing, of course, increases the power imbalance that is already in place in the workplace, because
Thank you. I was starting to think, okay, where are we going with the discussion? Is everything just black? Is everything just so sad? And is there no hope? But please continue.
I don't know. I think for me the basic question is the most important question is like. Whose digital technology is used in the workplace? So who designs it? Who shapes it? This is for me the basic question. And in Austria, we have some ways, work council members have some ways to participate in decisions about how such systems are being used. I have no illusions this will not be introduced in other European countries, and certainly not in Kenya, for example, I believe. But I think we have to fight for this co-shaping and negotiating how digital technology is being used in the workplace. This is for me the most important aspect.
So you have already basically given our direction towards regulation and rights. So the co-determination rights in Austria are theoretically very strong, but in our work we are seeing that more and more systems are being used that have been made outside of Europe without knowledge of our workers' rights. And this leads to an erosion of rights. I'm happy to have Madeleine here, who is an expert on digital law and presently also working on a study on digital rights, new rights, old rights, transparency rights. And we had also already mentioned the ILO efforts. Madeleine, would you care to tell us what are digital rights and why are they relevant in our context?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation and especially for your intriguing and moving keynote. Thank you so much, and also for your insights, Wolfie. I think we've covered more like the applied level or the practical level. So in my view or in my work is to contribute a little bit from the, let's say, normative level, because my research, as has already been introduced so kindly before, is mainly at the intersection of ethics and law in the digital context, with special focus, of course, on AI, and especially in the workers' context, AI-based decision-making and algorithmic decision-making. And in the course of this, let's say, research focus, especially in the work context, we've had the opportunity and the privilege to carry out projects already commissioned by the Chamber of Labor, especially addressing questions of transparency and what rights do employees actually have in work settings where a lot of previously human conducted decision-making procedures or decision-making procedures which were mainly taken by the management level, for example, are now outsourced to data-driven systems, to algorithmic systems in all, let's say, this digital age. So, in this project, we exactly try to translate the actually already existing rights structure and the legal instruments, translate them into the digital context and have a look what is still needed, what's from a employee's perspective, where are legal gaps in legal protection. And this leads me to the question, what are digital rights? So I would say we should not understand digital rights as some autonomous separate category of rights. They are actually rooted in already existing rights foundation, for example, like fundamental rights, but also sector-specific rights with special focus on the working context, but also consumer protection, then human rights, of course, national laws. So we have already existing legal framework, which in some instances might prove very robust, but also there are new challenges which arise in the digital context. So there might be a need to translate digital rights into the digital context and adapt them a little or shift them a little. So maybe we can come to that later and have a look at what exactly has to be altered or shifted in the already existing digital rights structure to make them more fitting for our new challenges that arise in the digital context. So I think digital rights, to sum it up, are very relevant to render already existing rights more effective and enforceable in a digital context, which, when we are honest, as we've heard, shapes almost all areas of our lives and especially the working context.
And what would be specific digital rights?
Well, I've tried to make the distinction a little between already existing rights, which can be also applied in a digital context. For example, the right to education, you can translate it into digital scenarios, for example, where you provide employees with some education in the area of AI literacy, for example. But then there are also rights and areas which did not exist, at least in this form before. For example, the right to disconnect. This is something that is especially necessary in digital scenarios when we have problems of demarcating or draw our to have limits on how often we have to answer to our employer and that we have to be reached all the time. So this is more like from a mental health perspective. And this right comes particularly pertinent in scenarios where there is this constant digital communication and connectivity, which has not been there before, at least to this extent.
Thank you. I feel that we have a real gap here. And before I give the floor to the audience, would you like to add something on rights? You mentioned the ILO paper, and I have the feeling that what we have here in Europe has such a different perspective. So we have, especially in Austria, we have strong rights, but they are eroded due to intransparency and AI being deployed without audits, as we have heard in the keynote in the morning. How do you see it? At the same time, we have also this deregulation. So we have the AI Act, it would bring audits and certifications, but we don't want them because innovation is more important. On the other hand, we have this really terrible background situation.
Okay, I'm not going to go into the AI Act. That's going to be a huge 20-minute tangent. I think I want to push back a little because we often hear, and I've heard it a few times, even in the keynote questions yesterday, like, oh, but the rights here in Austria are really good, really strong, we're protected, we're safe. People in Germany say the same thing, and just last week I was talking to people who are in a workers' council, who are in employment relationships, who have rights, who are unionized, and they were talking about the limitations of their very big powers. Because when you're working for an outsourcing company and Meta pulls back the project, what the Workers' Council can negotiate is what the people who are getting fired will get as a compensation package. That is as far as they can negotiate. So there's a lot of room for much improvement, especially because the thing that's so weird and unique about this data work industry is that the material being produced and labored on is digital. It happens on the internet. All you need is a computer. You can move a project. Like Volkswagen cannot move their outsourced factories out of Brazil within 1 day. Meta can move their outsourced projects out of Nairobi within 1 day and bring it to Germany in 2 weeks. And the globality of it and the speed of it is very unique, and it's being used to play out workers against each other very strongly. On the ILO, on the question of rights, there's a lot that can be done. I really love what you're saying, that we have existing rights that can be used. People before us have fought for minimum wage rights, and we have to keep fighting to not let them be eroded. So when workers in Germany are getting 14 euros an hour, they were not getting paid breaks, which is a right assured by labor rights law in Germany, but they had to fight for it. They had to fight for the productivity counter and mouse tracking, which would put them automatically as not working and taking a break after 5 minutes. They had fought for it, and now it's 7 minutes and 30 seconds. So they can take 2 minutes longer of doing your work without moving your mouse. So the small victories, they matter. They're very important. And it's, I think the basis for my pushback is, let's not get complacent and careless and say, well, we have so many rights in Europe. We do, but we need to fight for them to continue, and we need to fight for everyone else to also have rights, because otherwise we're going to be played against each other.
Thank you so much. I want to pick up on the question of AI and deregulation, because what I wanted to add is that I've said we have this robust framework, but also there remain gaps, because, for example, when it comes to data and the processing of personal data, we are in the scope of the General Data Protection Regulation, for example, the GDPR. Yet this regulation mostly provides individual rights for individual employees, in this case, let's say. So there's not much room for, let's say, collective co-determination, for example, on the collective level. The AI Act, on the other hand, is not a individual rights document per se. It contains few single rights, which are very, very limited to AI systems that just fall within the scope of this regulation. So as soon as we just have, let's call them normal algorithmic systems, which do not fulfill the AI definition, then we are also out of the scope. So we have this fragmented legal protection mechanisms, which sometimes leave gaps and that have to be addressed in this digital context.
I would also like to respond.
Just let me address you with a question concerning this. In general, what you want to say, but please add also the topic that we have rights, we have laws, but we have also a practice and we have a daily life, and maybe between them there is a gap. What do you see here in your work? How big is the gap, and how often is something from technology taken against the people?
Yeah, I would fully agree. There are many limitations and problems also with co-determination in Austria and Germany. First, there are many companies that don't have any work council, maybe half. And then it depends very largely on the sector, how much economic pressure is there, and so on. And I would say, so I've been working with a few hundred work council members in the last decade, I think. I've been basically training them, but I also heard a lot of them, what they told. And it's a huge challenge to keep up with massive and complex software systems, complex data processing operations. There are legal and technical questions involved, but in the end, it's not so much about that. It's about the capability to mobilize your colleagues to organize. And if you have leverage, then you can achieve a lot, and then you can also use all the legal mechanisms that are there to fight for your interests. And otherwise, you cannot. And I would also say, I've seen really horrible systems that process a lot of behavioral data, create performance ratings and so on, in a company that there was no economic pressure. It was not so much pressure to do a lot of work in not so much time and so on. And so basically everything was fine. And in another company organization, there was a lot of pressure, and then it really affects everything when you have these digital systems that kind of with algorithmic control and so on. So it depends also on many things that are not about digital technology.
Yeah. Do you see a gap between reality and law?
There is always a gap. I could talk a day about GDPR enforcement, for example, but I think we don't have to do that now. Still, I see there are many opportunities that you can use the law as a leverage, not just data protection law or in the future the AI Act, but also like in Austria, mostly labor law. Labor law is the most important thing for regulation of algorithmic technology, digital technology in the workplace in Austria, not the GDPR.
No. And data protection, of course.
No, labor law is much more important.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
Let's take some questions from the audience. We have a microphone coming.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to stay with the subject of leverage. I noticed on your map that there was no representation from the Anglo-Saxon world within those that were part of your project. There was nobody in North America, nobody in the UK, nobody in Australia. I know they have data workers there. Two questions. One, was that coincidental or was that on purpose? And then the second part, getting back to the leverage, I think those workers that are clearly not going through the same material than those that you had in your proposal or in your project, if they were to see the material that the others see, I think there's a big difference. They have a vote in the United States. And that would be one way of moving things, because at the end, Wolfgang, you also mentioned, where is this technology coming from? If you're not able to hit the source, then I'm not quite sure how we're supposed to make any progress. Thank you.
I can answer straight up. So first thing, if you know organized data workers who would like to do some amazing research, send them my way, because our field access is extremely difficult. Just the map reflects the people that we were able to find, who were willing to work with us, to take the risk, to put the work in, because it is a lot of work doing research. I don't need to tell anyone here. Second thing I want to say is we tend to always bring snippets from the work of people, organized data workers in Nairobi, because to be honest, they are the bravest of the data workers we work with. They bring the most vulnerable, acute stories, and they're not afraid to show their faces. We do have the exact same stories of people seeing terrorist attacks, decapitations, maulings in Germany. But those pieces, they are less impactful in a keynote like this, just because people wanted their voices distorted. They didn't want their own faces. The stories are just as impactful, but just visually and for the presentation. So this happens all over the world. It happens in very similar forms all over the world. There was a second question. I also want leverage. Love leverage. Let's get more of that.
I'm also not sure what was the exact.
Yes, you were to get some people specifically in the United States, at least exposed to that of what you already came up with. I suspect that will flexibility. And the difference between them and the rest is they have a vote. And that means that they have more leverage due to their location than is perhaps somebody in Nairobi.
Yeah, I think we have seen a lot of organizing also at the big tech companies and so on, and they also try to look into people who are embedded in the AI supply chain, tech supply chain elsewhere a lot. And I think, of course, this can be powerful, but in the end also we have seen then they got fired from Google and other companies. But they're still doing this work, and I think it can be important.
I think you're tackling that. Sure, there are plenty in it.
Yeah, but I don't know so much about the US and labor rights, to be very honest, and also not so much in practice.
Let's take some other questions before we... Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions. I'm from the Inclusive AI Lab at Utrecht University, and we have a colleague who's done research with AI data workers in China. And she found that it was in a mid-sized city, I forget which one, but we can look it up later if you're interested. And she found that recruitment was mostly targeted at women, and especially mothers. And some of the workplaces were also designed to support childcare. And I was wondering, what are the workspaces like, if there are any in the workers that you speak with, and also what's the gender, is there a gender element in recruitment that you've come across?
Not really. We haven't really seen a clear focus towards gender, particularly with the workers that we've worked with. It's basically divided across the genders. But I think what I also want to point out is there's another inquiry we're currently working on, of a lady in India, a housewife, whose job is to move around with a camera tapped to her forehead, doing her ordinary daily tasks. And that is actually used to train AI. So it'll be coming soon.
So the workplaces can be an office space, just a Großraumbüro in Nairobi. It can be a room in an apartment where people live. It can be anywhere, really.
Yeah. You can get a job like take pictures of a 4-year-old child. Send us a picture of your feet. Yeah, we have people who have been asked. One of our colleagues who was actually from the US, working for Amazon Mechanical Turk, was actually being asked to send pictures of her feet. God knows what they were for.
And the question of workspaces is very important because it brings us to occupational health and safety regulation, which is super powerful. It's extremely important. Like working on your computer all day from a sofa can have a terrible impact on your overall health. Like your back, your eyes, your wrists, your joints, like all of this, we have frameworks to address that. And it's important that those are applied on for platform workers, that they are applied for the specific challenges that workers face, working with content, working with like ever-changing instructions. I don't know if anyone here has ever opened the community guidelines of a social media sites, but they're like 300 pages long, and the training documents that people get to do content moderations are much longer, much more specific. They change weekly. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. There's a lot of challenges that come with that work that need to be addressed and updated in occupational health and safety laws. And the question of leverage is very essential. It's at the core of what we do. The part of our work that is less research focused and more advocacy focused and support focused is all about creating spaces for networks to be built internationally, creating spaces for solidarity to emerge, supporting the solidarity that does appear. The Data Labelers Association, the event photos that you saw, they were created very much with our support. I was running event management for their launch, for their online launch presentation. So this is where we stop being researchers and become research advocates. And yeah, if we're amazingly successful, we are going to help workers get more leverage.
Thank you so much for this panel and all the contributions. So my question is also for Camila and Edu, is about, you mentioned the firing or also the NDA contracts that the workers need to sign. So what are the other forms of resistance companies are doing today with data workers? If you could elaborate more in terms of what they are trying to, restrict them.
So the first one is the length of the contracts, as we spoke there. So you have a 4-day work contract. That alone governs how much work you can do. And the second thing is they also pay hush money. So I have to good authority that the workers in Nairobi who were outspoken were paid 20,000 each to keep quiet. So, and the problem is if this guy who has been getting $2 an hour gets 20,000, it means I also might be in line to get 20,000. So that also already limits how many people can do that. The other thing also is these companies also deliberately target already vulnerable people. So they give you a work contract. Like some of the employees, even in Germany, their visa in Germany is tied to their work at this place. So it means if you quit our job, then you're going back to Iran, you're going back to Syria. So that's some of the stuff they do. And also, they will fire you, like, on the spot. And the problem with firing you, is in a work like this, it's very easy to come up with a reason to fire you. They will tell you, well, you were too slow with your work, and then you're gone. So Daniel Motang from South Africa was one of the first workers from Kenya to speak about this. Said, guys, we need to unionize. And the next minute, he was gone for incompetence. In Gulu, Uganda, a lady was pregnant. And then she was like, look, we need to have maternity benefits. And the next minute, she was fired for incompetence. So the laws of what they can do. And the other thing, what Camille also mentioned, is how it's very easy for them to jump. So they were in Kenya and working, some was in a contract with Meta in Nairobi, Kenya. When the story came out that they were being exploited, they moved to Majorel, another company. When the workers sued Majorel, they jumped ship and went to Ghana. And there are 54 countries in Africa, as an example. So they can just keep jumping ship, And they also bribe politicians.
Yeah.
If for those who watched the documentary yesterday, the president of Kenya came out saying, we have put on laws now that no one can sue you. But how does a president say that they've made laws to make it impossible to sue a company exploiting the citizens of his country? So because I've done significant work in Kenya, I know exactly how the money moved, So this is what some of the things that these companies do to make sure you don't speak. You're also isolated. And it's deliberate that these workers often work like, in silos. They don't work together. So they keep it deliberate that you have to be alone. And if you're alone, you're vulnerable and you can be fired. Because if you're alone, you think about your particular domestic situation and you're like, can I afford this? That's why they go to Kibera.
And there's the outrageous examples and there's the classic union busting playbook. Teamwork is frowned upon. You can't talk about with your colleagues. You can't have a chat group outside of the official company chat group. Some of those platforms, labor platforms, where they're not employees. So if you're not an employee, you're already like 4 steps behind on organizing because you have to first fight for the right to organize. And those platforms have terms and conditions. If you say that you work with us, you might get fired for breaching the terms and conditions. If you have an outside group chat, same thing. If there's one thing that's been well established the last 20 years, tech companies do know all of the union busting playbook. They do it with software engineers, they do it with data workers.
I find it really interesting because it shows the relevance of the platform work directive that is being put into Austrian law right now, late, but better late than never, because it's against the same practices, which are Lieferando, Uber, etc., Bolt.
And there's platforms in Europe too. Also. Don't be...
Yes. I'm taking a last question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question for you guys as well, because it's such an important and fascinating project. My question is so related to a little bit what you said earlier, the power relations within that. So it seems as if the most vulnerable are the ones that are coming out with their faces, apparently, which is an interesting fact in itself, right? The question, though, is why is it important that they come out with their faces and identities and life situations? I do see the value of like talking about real people and showing real stories, because I think it's so important to carve out that. But would it have been possible without their faces and identities too? Or why do you think this is important?
It helps people to care. When people care, we have a bigger chance of.
I have to say there are many videos and zines without face and distorted voices. I understand that you just took it for the purposes of the presentation now.
Yeah, there are others without the faces.
Exactly.
Also, we've also been accused of AI generating some of these stories. So it helps when you can hear Maureen talk about experiences, because if I speak, I'm told this was AI generated.
I do see the point. No, I fully buy into the emotions that come along with it.
Maybe you're speaking from is it more helpful to have statistics and a long report that can be given to, for example, policymakers? There's other people also doing that. We are sometimes co-authors to those things. We also do that, but that is not always very effective. And we all know that United Nations reports, there's a United Nations reports on the use of United Nations reports, and no one reads that. If we have something we have a comic book on our project repository, that was one of the most impactful projects because people see it, it's engaging, it brings a human side to something that's horrible and depressing. People don't want to read horrible and depressing things. But if you package it in a way that creates empathy, movement, solidarity, we've been talking about sector solidarity, about labor solidarity, but that can be across sectors, that can be civil society, regular people. That can spark change. It can be powerful. It's not always, but it can be, and that's our hope.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, for time reasons, I heard already the clapping from the other room. I will just ask a final question because we didn't talk very much about solutions. So what can we learn from community researchers and data workers organizing? Because this is one thing that I'm very, very interested in, as we had a conference a couple of months ago where we were all basically hopeless. How can we deal with the power, especially of big tech? And what can we do? What can we learn? And what can we ask our governments? Very brief reply, if you like, from all of you. Thank you.
I think on the one hand, as I already said, I think in the workplace, when it comes to digital technology, it's really about organizing, about building capacity, about training worker representatives, and so on. This is the most important thing. And on the political level, I could talk about many kind of different kind of regulation and frameworks and so on. But I think my conclusion is in many areas, not just these, is that liability in global supply chains is really one of the major issues. This is difficult also in Europe now. There is something, but not enough. Liability also, when in Austria, a financial police is doing a raid at Amazon, then they find subcontractors, subcontractors, and they violate the law, and nothing happens to Amazon. So liability.
Enforcement, if I understand it.
Yes.
I would say empowerment through transparency. We've already heard that there is a power asymmetry, which is also accompanied in these sectors by information asymmetry. So often the employer has more information, be it about a system or a technology, than the employees. So I think the most crucial thing here is to enforce the rights to information, right to access, explanation, to make data-driven systems, algorithmic systems, and AI more transparent to workers and employees, so they also know their rights, because if they don't know their rights, they cannot enforce them?
So what I would say is, what we can learn from this kind of research is, number one, do no harm to the workers. Always protect them. They are people. They are not sources of news. So they are people with lives can stand to lose a lot, even if just a cent they are getting. But if you just are reckless with their information, they can lose everything. Then in terms of solutions, the first thing is, we the people here need to be responsible in how we use these technologies, because we are the ones propping up, when they say, oh, ChatGPT has crossed 1 billion users or whatever number they're saying, we are the 1, 2, 3, 4 number, right? So of course I know I cannot make you stop, but perhaps pause in how you use these technologies. Don't jump on every little trend you see, making cartoons, making cats dance. Some of these things, let's not have FOMO or fear of missing out. The third thing I would say is, we also need to hold our politicians to account, because we here in the global minority, we have more control or more power to influence our politicians than people in the global majority. So let's put pressure on those politicians to say, if these companies are registered in Austria, are you doing fair practices? When we are watching movies, we always, or when we are eating, we check sustainability. We put pressure on sweatshops in Asia or wherever, right? So we always worry about sustainability. Let's do the same with these digital products. We always watch movies and say, no animals were harmed in the production of this movie. Let's demand that every AI product has a similar label, that no humans were harmed in the production of this whatever AI tool.
You stole the best line. I'm going to do the opposite of what I've been doing the whole time, and I'm not going to talk about labor. I'm going to talk about what you can do as a person outside of your labor organizing, which hopefully all of us are doing, which is echoing what was said yesterday at the end of the movie. Ask AI for what? This system is being introduced, is being built. We're talking about sovereign European AI. Well, first of all, for what? And second of all, how are we doing it? So if we collectively agree that building ChatGPT except just European is the way to go, then the question is for what? For what purposes? For what uses? And the second one is, who is building it? Where does the data come from? Under what conditions is it produced? How is it sustained? This is something that you can do as a citizen, as a user, as someone who works in a company who's maybe introducing AI, and then they're like, oh, we're doing AI for timesheets. And you're like, for what? Why? How was this built? Those are all spaces for resistance and for questioning that we can inhabit as people in every possible capacity, but also labor organizing.
Thank you so much.